Hey guys, if this video has in any way helped you out, I would just want to encourage you guys to share it on your Facebook wall and comment on it, like it, whatever you feel like doing, just as a way to let me know that it's helped you out, and to just get that message out to somebody else who needs it. You may know somebody on that you're friends with that needs to hear this message, and if this can help them in any way, that's what this ministry is all about. So like it, share it, comment on it, do whatever it takes. But thank you guys so much for watching this, and I hope you enjoy it. You know, from the very beginning, one of the things that we do as people is make excuses. If you think about when we were kids, it starts really early, because we, as kids, have so many excuses that we make. You know, the most common one that's probably way overused is "my dog ate my homework," or maybe you had a fight with one of your siblings, and the classic excuse of, "well, they started it." You know, even husbands, maybe sometimes, you know, when your wife has asked you to do something and you didn't do it, and you know, when she comes home, she asks, "hey, did you do this thing that I asked you to?" And your first response might be, "huh?" You know, you pretend like you didn't hear it, and hope that maybe she just doesn't ask you again. But you know, it's funny to kind of laugh at some of those things, but at the same time, you know, we use excuses in our lives to keep us from doing things. You know, we have so many excuses that we use, things like "I'm too fat," or "I'm too skinny," "I'm too tall," "I'm too short." You know, I don't look like him, I don't look like her. You know, I'm not smart enough, I'm not creative enough. You know, we always fight. You know, well, he wronged me, or she wronged me. You know, I could go on and make excuses after excuses, and they're all things that we do. We as humans just are naturally, you know, wired to make excuses. It's part of our sinful nature. And you know, sometimes when we make excuses like that, we keep ourselves from doing things. You know, just this week I caught like 5 minutes of America's Got Talent, and there was this guy on there named Frank, a 74-year-old man, and he came out and was talking to the judges for a little bit, and then told him he was going to sing, and he started singing, and this guy was really awesome. Like he sounded a lot like a Frank Sinatra type sound, and was really good, and I really thought he did a great job. And he gets to the end of the song, and the judges are talking to him and just amazed by how great this guy was. And one of the questions Howie Mandel asks him is, you know, how is it that you were never discovered? Like, how is it that you got this amazing talent, you sing so well, and you were never discovered? And the reason that Frank gives him is that he was never confident in himself, never confident in his abilities, and never wanted to take a step to try to do that, because he has a stuttering problem. And because he had this stuttering problem, he made that as an excuse that he shouldn't try to do this singing and try to make singing a career. And so often I think that we do this with God in that, you know, we know that we have these imperfections, and we use our imperfections as an excuse to not do what God asks us to do. You know, and as we've been going through this series, we're talking about perfectly imperfect, and people in the Bible that we so often think of as being these perfect people who have their lives together, and we find out as we get to know these people that they're not as perfect as we thought. And one of the people that I wanted to talk about is Moses. You know, Moses is probably one of the most popular characters we know of in the Bible, and people who probably didn't even grow up in the church know stories about Moses and know what he's famous for and what he did. And some of these people that we learn about in the Bible, we don't get a whole lot of information on. We sometimes don't get to know a whole lot about who they were before God used them. But Moses is one of the people that we do know a lot about. We know that he was adopted. He was born as an Israelite, and at that time Egypt was the main mega power in the world. And Moses, born as an Israelite, his mother wanted to make sure he didn't get killed by Pharaoh, so she put him in a basket and floated him down the Nile. And Pharaoh's daughter, found him and adopted him as her own. So we know that even though he was an Israelite, he grew up as an Egyptian. One of the other things we know is that even though Moses grew up in Pharaoh's house, even though he was had all the rights and privileges of being an Egyptian, he still identified with the Israelites. He knew that the Israelites were his people. And one day Moses sees this Egyptian guard basically beating some Israelites for whatever reason, and this just enrages Moses. So he basically sees this whole thing go down, and when nobody's looking, he goes over and kills the Egyptian. Like, just kills him and then buries him in the sand, hoping nobody would see it. Like, he waited until nobody could see him and went and did it. And the very next day he was basically confronted by some Israelites when he called them out on kind of fighting with each other, and when he realized that somebody saw him kill that Egyptian, he basically ran away. He left Egypt and bolted out of there. And then years later we kind of catch up with Moses, and he's married now, and is living with his wife's family, and is tending the flocks as a shepherd. And one day, while he's out tending his flocks, he's confronted by God. We all know the famous story of the burning bush and Moses' encounter with God. And really, this is such a powerful story and a powerful thing that we've seen enacted in movies, and story. It's a story that we've all heard about. But one of the things that so often is forgotten in that is the amount of times that Moses really rejected God's plan. We find out that there's 5 different times within that story that Moses finds an excuse to not do what God's asking him to do. The first thing we kind of see is that Moses didn't really think very much of himself. He kind of had low self-esteem. In Exodus chapter 3, verse 11, Moses says, who am I that I should just go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God basically responds by saying that he's going to be with Moses, to not worry about that, because God said he will be with you. And then so Moses kind of gets that answer from God, and then his next excuse is, well, what happens if I go there and and I say to the Israelites that the God of your fathers has sent me, and they ask me, well, what's his name? Then what do I tell them? He basically is asking God, what's your name? Like, how am I going to prove to these people that you are who you say you are, that you're the one that told me to come? And after that, God tells him to tell the people of Israel that I am is the one who sent me. He says that my name is I am, and basically from there goes into some details and lays out a plan for Moses on what he should do and how he should go about this if he encounters such an issue. And even though God gives him this plan, Moses' next question to God is, well, what if they don't believe me that you appeared to me? Like, how am I going to prove that? And God addresses the issue. He gives Moses a list of different miraculous things that he can do. And gives Moses the ability to show these miracles of God as a way of proof. Moses has a staff in his hand, and God tells him to throw it down, and when he does, it turns into a snake. And when Moses goes down to pick it back up, it turns back into a rod. God then told him to put his hand inside of his cloak, and when he pulled it out, it was covered in leprosy. And when he put it back inside of his cloak, he pulled it back out again, and his hand was completely healed. He even said that, if those aren't enough, you can take water out of the Nile and pour it out on the dry ground, and when you do, it'll turn into blood. And so Moses is now equipped with these opportunities to show that he is being used for God. And it's almost kind of like Moses is running out of excuses. Like God keeps coming back at him with a plan. Like when Moses has an excuse, God has something else for him. So Moses' next excuse is that he's got a stuttering problem. He tells God, well, I've never really been good with words. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to say it. I stutter and I spit over my words, and I'm just not the guy for you, God. Because all I'm going to do is trip over my words, and it's not going to be worth my time, because I'm not going to be efficient in saying what you need me to say. And God basically replies, and I almost think it's funny, God almost gives him this response of, saying, well, you think I don't know that? God says, I am the creator. I'm the one who made humans. I'm the one who created the human mouth. Do you think I don't know that you have a stuttering problem? Do you think I don't know that you're not very good with words? But I'm calling you to do this. Moses just finally, out of excuses, just begs God and says, just send somebody else. I'm not going to be good enough to do what you want me to do. Just send somebody else. And the Bible actually tells us that God gets mad at him. And as you read it, it's easy to see why God would get mad about that, because 4 times before this, Moses has thrown an excuse at God, and God's come back at him with a practical reason why God's going to be able to use him. And finally, at the end, Moses just send somebody else, and so that makes God angry. But God could have very easily just been like, you know what, I'm just not going to deal with this guy anymore. He doesn't want to work with me. He doesn't want to do the things I'm asking him to do. I'm done. I'm not going to deal with him. But no, God is set in wanting to use these imperfect people, and wanting to use Moses, despite his imperfections, despite his hang-ups, despite his excuses. God still wants to use him. And God basically had to take every single excuse that Moses threw at him and counter it with his plan, and just to get Moses to be at a point where he was remotely thinking about doing this thing for God and doing what God asked him to do. God doesn't ask us to do things because he's unaware of our imperfections. In fact, that's the reason that he chooses us. It's not to show others how great we are, but to show how great God is. Because despite how imperfect and flawed we are, God can still use us to do great things. No matter what it is that God's called you to do, despite whatever your excuses are, despite whatever imperfections you might have, God's fully aware of that. God's bigger than all of that. And as we look back at the story of Moses and seeing just how flawed he was, and just how many excuses he had because of how imperfect he was, God still chose to use him, because Moses was perfectly imperfect for God, and so are you.